Hi everyone, Comic Reviewer here. This time doing top 10 Grizzly Tales for Gruesome Kids episodes. Now I'm only going to do top 10 because mainly I just don't want to do top 25. So number 10, The Princess's Clothes. Now I think what makes this episode interesting is that we have a girl called Felicity who is obsessed with her clothes, and this is due to her father spoiling her and spending sheds loads of cash on stuff like clothes, shoes, and everything else. And this causes her mother to be deeply annoyed by this, so calling on one of the catalogue people, Miss Shears. Now, Miss Shears is actually meant to be a witch, and at the same time, Felicity's mother and father don't seem to know about this. Yet Felicity does. I think what makes the episode interesting is that Felicity does get the end of her ropes by the end and gets her desserts. I think when you watch an episode called Superstitious Nonsense, they pretty much used Felicity's design and her parents for the gas lamp family. Now, the moral of the story is just don't be obsessed with your clothes, which is pretty interesting. Now, number 9, Death by Chocolate. Now, I think what makes the episode interesting is that we've all had that family member in our family who likes sweets or chocolate, and Selena Slurp kind of takes the cake. She pretty much eats gallons of chocolate, eats nothing but it, and you feel sorry for her sister having to be tortured by her. I think what makes the episode interesting is that at the same time there is an egg inside one of the chocolate rabbits, which eventually hatches and goes into her stomach, and in the end she does get her desserts. The moral of the story is just don't be obsessed with chocolate. I think what the episode does have an interesting feel is that there are chocoholics out there, but it's important to stop when you stop. Now let's get on. Number 8, Weird Willard. I think what makes Willard an interesting episode is how Willard pretty much spreads like tall tales and everything else about what he does, and eventually he does get called for it, and eventually is determined to prove that he can steal the sun, at the same time covering up from his parents and so on. Now what makes the episode interesting is that I think somewhere at school we all tell tales, but it's important not to do it because it can get carried away, and sometimes with lying you can either get carried away or eventually you get found out. What makes episode Willard interesting is I'm actually surprised as how Willard is able to steal the sun, and that raises a lot of questions to how he does it. I mean, I don't think you can actually do that in real life. So, number 7, Crocodile Tears. Now, I think we've all used crying to get what we want. Now, what makes the episode interesting is how Gwendolyn uses her tears to get what she wants, and yet her family just completely let it. The important thing is not to let it happen. And eventually, after being warned not to cry again, and after going to the pantomime, she eventually does, and she does get her end. The moral of the story is don't cry to get what you want, and so on. What's interesting is that Gwendolyn's design is reused in one episode, Dr. Moribundus, and some other ones. Let's get on the next one. Number 6, Urban Fox. Now, I think what makes Urban Fox a pretty good episode is how you have a fox who lives with her family members. At the same time, two kids from the country, Tamara and Pierce, move in to the neighbourhood, and they go fox hunting after him. What makes the episode interesting is how the fox is more cunning and more smarter than Tamara and Pierce. At the same time, Tamara and Pierce leave a trail of destruction through the neighbourhood with no concern or care. What makes the episode interesting is that it doesn't involve a gruesome outcome, no paranormal things, just a simple, basic episode. And I give it some credit for not having to do that again. And it's an interesting episode. So, number 6, The Lobsters Scream. Now, what makes the Lobster Scream interesting is how you have a character called Shannon Shellfish, who is completely selfish, and anytime she asks for things, she throws it away saying, I don't want this anymore, I don't want that. But after being offered to go to a restaurant and such, she only wants to eat the lobster just so she can get her lobster costume. And there is a certain thing in the episode as to why lobsters are red and why you should eat them right away. What makes the episode interesting is how Shannon Shellfish is shown to be completely wasteful and shows no concern for her surroundings or anything. For example, she throws things away, and you should always think first what you want to buy before it becomes a complete waste. And it is a good episode, I give it that. So, number 4, Big Head. Now, I think what makes the episode Big Head interesting is how you have Sammy Sliverall, who's actually appeared in a football match and even shook hands with the Queen, and eventually gets carried away with it, and starts to think he's a celebrity, even using his father's credit card to get what he wants. Now, what's interesting that this reminds me a lot of my cousin, who's actually appeared on the news and has eventually started becoming big-headed himself. I think what makes Sammy Sliverall interesting is how he's determined to keep deluding himself into thinking he's a celebrity, and at the same time using his father's credit card to get things that are expensive, showing no concern for his family, and so on. It's a good episode, and I give it some credit. Now, number 3, the Clothes Pigs. What makes the Clothes Pigs interesting is how you have these 3 little runts of the litter who determine to get their meal. At the same time, in the city, you have a character called Truman Shuffle, who's known as Truffle for short. At the same time, he treats his house like a hotel, and his parents like slaves, and using them for various tasks. At the same time, Truffle shows no concern for his mum when she falls down the stairs, and goes out to get fish and chips. At the same time, Truman Shuffle, or Truffle, is shown to be selfish, inconsiderate, and shows no concern for anything. The moral of the story is, don't treat your house like a hotel, or your parents like slaves. And the episode is pretty hilarious, because I think we've all been through that. So, number 2, the People Potter. What makes the episode interesting is we have a character called Greta, who is a complete klutz, and at the same time doesn't leave things alone, and isn't always aware of her surroundings. What's interesting is that anytime she's near something, she causes property damage, or better yet, destroy anything in her path. It's kind of that moment, I think somewhere in life we've all had that friend who is completely clumsy, or we have been completely clumsy in our life. What's interesting is that Greta's design has been used multiple times in Silence is Golden, The Urban Fox, which I've pointed out on, and so on. And what's interesting is that the People Potter is an interesting episode, is how Greta's parents are more concerned for their bars than their house or anything else. Now, number 1, Dr. Moribundus. Now, I think somewhere in life we've all faked illnesses to get off school, to get off trips, to get off exams, and so on. What makes it so interesting is that you have a girl called Laura Rie who pretends to be ill just to get off school, and only for the summertime she miraculously makes a recovery, but when school time comes, she fakes her illnesses, and at the same time takes things too far, and you have a character called Dr. Moribundus who looks like a version of Zorro, or better yet, El Nombre. What's interesting is that Dr. Moribundus is aware about Laura Rie's illnesses, and at the same time does something that actually does make her go back to school, and it's unknown what it was. What's interesting is that Dr. Moribundus' design is reused in the Barber of Civil, and that's a great way to reuse character designs. I actually like the episode because there is a certain moral saying, don't fake illnesses to get off school, don't ever fake illnesses. And what's interesting is that Laura Riley's design, along with her parents, are reused again in Crocodile Tears and other things. So this is my top 10. So like, comment, and subscribe. Comic Reviewer here, signing out.